All right, so you know how we love to really dig into these like head-scratching trends?
Yeah.
Well, buckle up because today's deep dive is all about the U.S. housing market. And, you sent in this article about mortgage rates.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like every week they just keep going up and up and up.
Yeah. It's definitely been a wild ride.
It really has. And the thing is, you'd think with those rates going up, people would be kind of shying away.
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, basic economics 101, higher prices usually mean less demand.
Exactly. But that's not what's happening. In fact, mortgage applications are actually going up.
It seems counterintuitive, but the data doesn't lie. Mortgage applications actually increased last week, even though interest rates went up for the fourth week in a row.
I mean, it's like gravity decided to reverse itself in the housing market or something.
It definitely has people scratching their heads.
So let's break this down, all right? According to this article from CNBC, the average interest rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage just hit 6.90%.
Oof, that's a number we haven't seen since July.
I know, right? So you'd think buyers would be running for the hills.
Right. You'd expect them to hit the pause button, wait for things to settle down a bit.
Exactly. But instead, applications actually inched up last week.
It's not a huge surge, but it's definitely notable considering where rates are.
So what's going on here? What's motivating buyers to jump into the market now when, everything seems to be pointing towards maybe waiting a little bit?
Well, the article dives into that, and it seems there are a couple of things happening. First, it's not just a refinance boom driving this. Purchase applications, people actually looking to buy homes are up too.
Up how much?
2% for the week. So it's not like the market's suddenly on fire, but still a pretty significant jump.
2%, yeah. That is pretty interesting considering.
Especially when you remember those rates are still climbing.
Totally. And the article, it did mention that applications overall are still down a bit compared to this time last year, right?
That's right. They're still 1% lower than the same week a year ago. So it's not like we're in some sort of, crazy housing bubble 2.0 or anything.
Right. Okay, so that kind of helps put things into perspective. It's not like this sudden massive shift in the market, but it's still, it's a head scratcher. Why are people buying now?
Well, the article highlights that conventional and FHA loans are really leading the charge here, with FHA applications seeing a 7% jump.
Okay, so FHA loans, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly a real estate mogul.
Right.
Could you remind me what makes them different?
Of course. So an FHA loan, which stands for a Federal Housing Administration loan, it's basically designed to make homeownership a little more accessible.
Okay.
Especially for first-time buyers. They usually require a smaller down payment than you'd need for a conventional loan, and they tend to be a bit more lenient when it comes to credit scores.
So they're kind of like the training wheels of mortgages, in a way.
In a sense, yeah. They're a way to get your foot in the door without needing that massive down payment that can be such a hurdle for a lot of people.
That makes sense. But wouldn't that always make them attractive? Why is this surge in FHA applications happening now? Is it just because rates are high in general?
Well, that's definitely part of it. FHA loans often have slightly better interest rates compared to conventional loans, so in this high-rate environment, they look even more appealing. It's all about affordability, especially when buyers are already feeling squeezed by those rising rates.
So it's like, okay, rates might be high, but if I can shave off a little bit by going FHA.
Exactly. It's about finding a way to make the numbers work in a challenging market. But there's another piece to this puzzle. Inventory. The article mentions that inventory is loosening up a bit in some markets.
Meaning?
More homes to choose from.
Ah, okay.
So you combine a slightly larger pool of homes with those more favorable FHA loan rates, and it creates a window of opportunity for buyers, especially those who are really set on buying now.
Okay, so it's starting to make sense how these seemingly contradictory things, rising rates and increasing applications, can actually coexist.
Right. Because it's not just one story, it's multiple narratives playing out at the same time.
Like those two games on the same board that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. You've got some folks reacting to rising rates, feeling that urgency to lock in a rate before they climb even higher.
Right.
And then you have this other group, probably a lot of first-time buyers, who are drawn to the affordability of FHA loans, and they're seeing some opportunities with the increased inventory.
And it's working for them. They're finding ways to make it work.
It seems so.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
But things get really interesting when we start looking at the refinance numbers. Because the article also mentions that refi applications were also up 2% for the week.
Yeah, that caught my eye too. And not just that, they're actually 43% higher than this time last year.
43%. That's a huge jump.
It is. It really seems like people are maybe a little worried about those rates going even higher.
So they're trying to lock in a fixed rate now, even if it's not, the best rate they could possibly get.
Exactly. They're thinking better to secure a decent rate today than risk facing an even higher one down the road.
Yeah.
It's like a defensive move,
Trying to protect themselves from those potential future increases.
Exactly. And it's a smart move for a lot of people, especially if they're concerned about, potentially not being able to afford those higher payments down the line.
So we've got buyers motivated by opportunity and others driven by maybe a little bit of fear.
It's a really interesting mix of motivations for sure.
And remember, all of this is happening against this backdrop of, general economic uncertainty, rising inflation, all that fun stuff.
Right. It just adds another layer of complexity to the whole picture.
Which makes me wonder if there are any other unexpected forces at play here, like things we might not be considering.
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Did you know that mortgage rates actually stayed flat for most of last week?
Wait, really? I thought we were talking about the fourth straight week of rate hikes.
I know, right? It's a bit of a twist. But it turns out we can thank geopolitics for that little pause.
Hold on. Geopolitics is messing with our mortgage rates now.
Believed or not, yes. It seems the U.S. authorizing Ukraine to use long-range missiles against Russia, and then Russia updating its nuclear weapons doctrine in response, well, let's just say investors got a bit spooked.
So something happening on the other side of the world, a conflict thousands of miles away, that can actually impact decisions about homeownership here in the U.S.
It's a connected world, even in ways we might not always realize. When investors get nervous, they look for safety, and one of those safe havens is U.S. bonds. That increased demand drives bond yields down. And since mortgage rates are pretty closely tied to those bond yields, well, they tend to follow suit. So you have this chain reaction. U.S. action, Russia's response, investors get nervous, they flock to bonds, bond yields drop, and mortgage rates dip too. It's wild.
Wow, it's like a financial butterfly effect.
Yeah.
So something small happens over there, and it creates these ripples that impact something as big as the housing market here.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is.
It's making me think we should all be paying a lot more attention to international news, maybe brushing up on our global politics knowledge.
Right. You never know when a geopolitical event might end up influencing your mortgage rate.
Exactly. Okay, so just to recap, because we've covered a lot of ground already. We've got rising rates, we've got FHA loans, we've got global tensions somehow impacting the U.S. housing market. It's a lot.
It's definitely a lot to unpack.
It really is.
It really is. It makes you realize that even when you're talking about something as, concrete as real estate, there are all these kind of invisible forces shaping the market in ways we might not even realize.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like we think about buying a house as this, very personal, individual decision. But clearly there's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what we were talking about before with those two different games happening at the same time on the same board.
Right.
On the one hand, you've got folks reacting to these rising interest rates, trying to, lock in a rate before things get even worse.
Right. That whole financial defense strategy.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And then you have this other group of buyers, probably, a lot of first-time buyers, who are attracted to the relative affordability of those FHA loans.
Right.
And they're finding some opportunities with, maybe the uptick in available homes in certain areas.
So it's not just as simple as, rates go up, demand goes down. There's all these different layers depending on, which part of the market you're looking at.
Right. And it shows you that, to really understand the housing market, you can't just look at those big headline numbers. You have to really understand the different things that are motivating buyers and sellers.
Okay, so given, all this complexity, all these moving parts, where do we go from here? Is this upward trend in mortgage applications sustainable? Or are we heading for a slowdown?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, while we are seeing these, pockets of activity, we can't ignore that affordability is a major, major concern for a lot of potential buyers out there.
For sure.
And with rates continuing to climb, it's likely to, push some people out of the market altogether.
Especially, probably, those first-time buyers. Folks who are already struggling to save for a down payment in this crazy economy.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are going to feel those changes in interest rates the most.
Yeah.
I mean, even a small increase can have a big impact on their monthly payments.
Yeah.
And that could really affect whether they even qualify for a loan.
So there's a real chance that even though we're seeing some momentum now, those rising rates could, eventually put the brakes on things.
It's a definite possibility, yeah. But then again, there's always a chance that something unexpected could happen.
Right. Like what? Like a sudden influx of inventory hitting the market.
That's one possibility.
Or maybe, another geopolitical situation that throws investors into a frenzy.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen next. There are just so many factors that can influence the market. It's impossible to predict with certainty.
So what does all this mean for, our listener? The one who sent in that article about these seemingly contradictory trends. What's the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest thing is that, the market is rarely straightforward. There are always multiple things happening at the same time, and to really make good decisions, you have to understand those nuances.
Right. It's all about, doing your research, talking to experts, really digging into the data to understand what's going on in your local market.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
There's no shame in not understanding something, especially when we're talking about something as complicated as, as real estate.
Totally. I think we've all been there where we hear all these terms getting thrown around. FHA loans, adjustable rate mortgages, bond yields, and it's like, wait, what?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but remember, buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions most people will ever make. So, taking the time to educate yourself is super important.
So we've talked about the trends, the different types of buyers, the potential for, both opportunity and risk in this market. But we haven't really addressed the elephant in the room.
You mean whether this upward trend in mortgage applications can really last?
Exactly. I mean, on the one hand, we have this basic economic principle. Higher costs usually mean less demand.
Yeah, and we've seen that play out in the housing market before. When interest rates go up, sales tend to slow down.
But then again, we have all these other things happening. We've got the FHA loans with their, slightly lower rates.
Right.
We've got people with those adjustable rate mortgages who want to, lock in a fixed rate before things get even worse.
Right.
And of course, we have the wild card of global events that can just totally shake things up.
It really creates this feeling of uncertainty, like the market's in a state of flux.
So are we heading for a correction? A boom? Or are things just going to, kind of muddle along?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But what we can do is look at the data, analyze the trends, and try to make sense of this really complex and constantly changing landscape.
Which is exactly what we've been trying to do in this deep dive. We've looked at those seemingly contradictory trends.
Uh-huh.
We've seen how rising mortgage rates, impact different types of buyers. And we've talked about those FHA loans, the adjustable rate mortgages, and even the influence of global events.
It's been a pretty comprehensive overview.
It has been. So with all that in mind, we want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to ponder.
Oh, okay.
Given everything we've discussed, those different forces at play, the uncertainty around rising interest rates, do you think this upward trend in mortgage applications is sustainable?
Or will those higher costs eventually, kind of dampen demand and lead to a shift in the market?
We've laid out all the pieces of the puzzle. Now it's up to you to decide how they fit together. It's like we've given you the map and the compass, and now you're off on this housing market adventure.
Exactly. There's no single right answer or anything.
Right.
The housing market changes all the time, so what looks like a sure thing today could be totally different a few months from now.
That's what makes it so interesting, right?
Yeah.
But also a little scary.
For sure. But that's why it's important to, stay informed. Don't just believe everything you read,
Right.
Dig a little deeper, ask questions, and don't be afraid to challenge, what you think you know.
That's great advice, honestly, for anything, not just the housing market, like the stock market.
Oh, yeah.
Or even just like trying to understand the news.
It's all about, taking charge of your own learning, really. Don't be afraid to look at things from different angles, look at the evidence, and make up your own mind.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked about a lot today. Those confusing trends in the housing market, rising rates, FHA loans. We even figured out how things happening on the other side of the world can impact mortgage rates here.
It's amazing how connected everything is.
It really is. And at the end of the day, we can't predict the future. No crystal ball here.
Yeah, I wish.
Right. But at least we can understand what's happening, get a clearer picture of all the forces at play.
Absolutely. And hopefully feel a little more confident about navigating those complexities.
So keep thinking about all this stuff. Keep asking questions and keep exploring.
The world of real estate is full of surprises.
That's right. Until next time, happy house hunting, everyone. Or not house hunting, whatever you're doing.
Whatever you're up to, stay informed.
Exactly.